everyone. Welcome. I'm Emily, and I have the honor of leading the marketing team here at Mode. It's wonderful to have you join us as we'll talk about where Mode is heading and to demo some new product capabilities designed to help data teams deliver better self-service reporting. Before we dive into this jam-packed agenda, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. Everything you need to interact with the Mode team and other viewers of this live stream are on the right-hand side of your screen. You can submit a question using the Q&A panel, and members of the Mode team are ready to dive in with answers. There's going to be some polls along the way, and we're eager to hear your thoughts. Feel free to use the chat to chat with other viewers as we go. And finally, with any technical questions, please reach out to Melissa via email. Now, let's recap our agenda for today. First, we will have our CEO, Gaurav, and one of our co-founders, Ben, talking about some of the history and future of business intelligence. Then they'll hand it over to some folks from our product team, Florian, Neha, and Sam, to talk about our product roadmap and to share those demos of our new self-service product capabilities, our integration with the dbt semantic layer, and new Mode datasets. Then Taylor Holland, Mode's new head of data, will round out the hour with a fireside chat with one of our awesome customers, Adam Smith, the head of data at Imperfect Foods. All right, let's get into it. Please join me in welcoming Gaurav up to the virtual stage. Hi, Gaurav.
Hi, Emily. Thank you. So hello, everyone. I'm Gaurav Rivari, CEO of Mode. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've been with Mode since January, and I'd love to start off by telling you a little bit about why I joined and the path that led me here. So I've been in data and analytics longer than I care to admit, and I've had a chance to witness firsthand several key phases of our industry's evolution. Many moons ago, I led products at a company called MicroStrategy that, along with Business Objects and Cognos, really came to define business intelligence in its first incarnation. And then later, when I had responsibility for analytics products at Oracle, we added Siebel Analytics and we added Hyperion and saw our BI portfolio expand beyond the underlying platform to include pre-built business analytics applications for sales, marketing, and finance. And most recently, at Numerify, I had the chance to lead a team that brought similar business applications for the IT operations and dev organizations to market. So that was one of the first cloud analytics applications built entirely on the modern data stack. Whether all this time in this field makes me an old BI hand or a glutton for punishment, I will let you decide. But what I can tell you is that having witnessed the various disruptions in the business analytics market over the past couple of decades, the reason I joined Mode was that I think what we're looking at here is one of the most exciting industry shifts that I've seen in all my years in data and analytics. As I reflect on the different moments of genuine change in the business analytics market over the past couple of decades, for me, the interesting question is not if or how the next major shift would happen, but when. I mean, even back in the early 2000s, it was well accepted that organizations need to embrace fact-based decision making. They need to provide timely insights, descriptive and predictive, to all stakeholders, regardless of their technical proficiency, with all types of data collected from all four corners of the business. The challenge itself was well understood. We've inched towards this in fits and starts through innovations such as relational OLAP, semantic layers, and ELT, to name but a few. But despite these technical innovations, for the vast majority of organizations, the goal of pervasive decision support, and allowing all employees to know what you need to know, to do what you need to do, has remained largely out of grasp. But in the last 12 months, as I have spoken to Mode's customers, I've heard their stories, I feel a strong sense of mounting excitement that the moment of significantly broader adoption is now upon us. A lot of Mode's customers today are the who's who of digital natives, companies that live or die by how well they use their data. Think DoorDash, Lyft, Shopify, Zillow, Figma, Canva, to name but a few. In fact, for the first time in my life, my 14-year-old daughter actually thinks I'm doing something cool because she knows the names of the companies that are Mode's customers. But all jokes aside, as I spent time with these customers, I learned more about how they were using Mode's platform, how technical analysts and non-technical business users were actively collaborating to answer questions in minutes and hours, not days and weeks. And I saw the absolutely central role that the data team was playing in making this vision a reality across almost 700 customers. There is hardly a company started in the last decade, especially ones with a digital channel, that doesn't put in place a data team in its wee early days. A team with technical skills and an appreciation for the business. A team whose charter is rapidly expanding to provide insights to all functions of the business. A team with a seat at the table. My conversations with Mode's customers showed me how the central mission of reducing time to insights was being brought to life by the partnership between data teams and business users. Multiple modes of analysis, code first and code free paradigms unified in a single platform. Most importantly, though, these customer conversations showed me the emerging contours of a modern BI platform, one that has the data team as its living, beating heart. You know, the science fiction novelist William Gibson talks about how the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. In a similar vein, it was clear to me from my very early customer conversations that these digital natives were using Mode to provide BI today in a way that the rest of the world would do tomorrow. But in my mind, the question of when still remained. What is it that would unlock more universal adoption? And the answer to that became increasingly clear to me in subsequent customer conversations, not just with digital natives, but the larger global 2000 organizations as well. These companies talked to us about their data and analytics strategy and the stunning rate at which they were cutting over increasingly more important workloads to the modern data stack. And then I knew that I had the answer to my question of when. The when is now. In my mind, the modern data stack with the cloud data warehouse at its core is the most significant architectural shift that I have seen in 2+ decades in our industry. Honestly, I don't think people fully appreciate the scale of what's happening here. Sure, they're cool, technical innovations such as the separation of compute and storage and the persistence layer. But the fundamental point is that the economics of storing all your data in one place has changed forever. Not too long ago, there were, just a few hundred companies that could afford to have atomic data from all functional areas in a single warehouse, kept current and available for analysis, with an army of DBAs to support it. Today, that's within the reach of any company for a few $1,000s a month as a fully managed service. As a result, the number of companies that can, in principle, analyze all their data across all functional areas at the most granular level has increased, I would argue, not by 2, but 3 orders of magnitude. This is a change of epic scale. And so at Mode, we believe that the time has now come for a modern BI platform that is purpose-built for the modern data stack. A modern BI platform that serves the needs of the entire business with the data team at its core. A modern BI platform that creates a collaborative experience for all stakeholders to analyze, explore, share, and present insights. Make no mistake, this is a once-in-a-generation transformation, one that will forever clear the path from data to action, and it is happening now. So today, you'll see this come to life as we show you new products that will fundamentally change the way you and your cross-functional partners work in Mode. You will hear from Imperfect Foods about how they're using Mode and these new products to solve important business challenges. And you will see an all-new Mode look and feel that we're introducing today. This is a brand identity that reflects both the future of Mode and the future of modern BI. You'll start to see this new Mode reflected on our website, in our marketing, and also right inside the product. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to our co-founder, Ben Stansel.
Thanks, Gaurav. Before getting to the exciting stuff of what's coming next, I want to give a quick story about how we actually got here. So prior to back when we started Mode in 2013, the data industry was in the middle of a very big transition. prior to the 2010s, most organizations used data for structured reporting and analysis. Data teams, such as they were data teams at all, worked under centralized IT teams and were primarily responsible for producing BI reports to help decision makers understand how various lines of business were performing. It was very much building dashboards and basic reporting and those sorts of things to kind of follow the contours of the business. And so these BI products were built on top of predefined data models and very heavily structured data cubes. And they worked. Business leaders has the standardized reporting that they needed to be able to look at monthly metrics and kind of track core KPIs, but they were often very slow and rigid. And so over the last decade, as Gaurav alluded to, data teams have broken out of this IT silo. That the rise of cloud data warehouses have made it possible for people to be able to track and analyze everything. And as an industry, we've built dozens of tools that have enabled us to all be way more data-driven and use data in way more interesting ways than we were historically. And so this has been a huge step forward from the world of data cubes that we had back in the 1990s and early 2000s. But it hasn't actually all been good. That moving from rigid cubes has actually also created this kind of analytical chaos where we now have data everywhere. Every department kind of has their preferred tools. Every team has dedicated dashboards, and none of these things ever seem to say the same thing. And so as a result, this is often what it feels like to work with data inside of a lot of companies. That business teams are trying to make sense of all the numbers they see. They have tools that are built for different use cases and designed for people with different kinds of technical skills, and none of the numbers ever quite match. And so to be able to track down numbers, you're often having to run around talking to a bunch of different teams, using a bunch of different tools, and trying to find the things that you're looking for. And data teams themselves often work in their own tools as well. And they're making important discoveries, they're doing important research, but because their work is often separate from like business intelligence tools that the majority of the company is using, it doesn't have nearly as big of an impact as it could. And we all end up kind of feeling a bit underwhelmed about what it is we're doing with our data and the impact we're actually having as a data team. And so how do we make this better? Like, this is a question that we've been trying to address for a long time at Mode. And we think the solution to this is a modern BI platform that's truly built around data teams. Our firm belief in this is that this is the way to rein in kind of today's data chaos. Without going back to the rigid BI tools of yesteryear, the way to do this is unifying analytical needs of data teams and business teams in the same place, such that both teams can feel comfortable in the same platform. And for that to be possible, we think there are three things that you need to achieve. First, we have to really amplify ad hoc analysis. That this sort of strategic research is among the most important work that data teams do, but when it's siloed in technical tools that other people can't find or use, it's often a dead end. And instead, this work, this kind of research and this ad hoc work and the type of work that data teams do to answer important questions should be as accessible as any core dashboard or any sort of leading KPIs. And second, self-serve BI should be a collaboration that's truly collaborative between business teams and data teams. That these two groups need to work together using everybody's expertise to determine the highest priority questions and the best ways to answer them. We can't just be throwing tickets over the wall at one another where business teams throw tickets at data teams and data teams throw dashboards back. It needs to be a much more collaborative and interactive experience between the two. And finally, these functions need to inform one another. That ad hoc analysis should drive the development of self-serve reporting, and self-serve reporting needs to be able to spark the questions that actually lead to these important ad hoc discoveries. That these functions are cyclical and they build on one another, providing more and more relevant context to everyone over time. And so that means they need to exist together as part of a holistic definition of business intelligence. And so this is exactly what we're working to build here at Mode. That modern BI can't be code first or code free, it has to be both. It can't just serve people who want to use notebooks or just provide visual analytical tools for people who want to use drag and drop. It has to serve everybody. And it can't provide just access to raw data. It needs to provide raw data and govern metrics and data sets. And all of this needs to be built on top of a language or a foundation based in SQL, which has become truly the standard of the modern data stack. And so this is what we've been working on bringing together for some time now. And across our customer base, we've actually seen how powerful this combination can be. That these charts show how Mode has been adopted by one of our enterprise customers, this chart on the left. And it often starts with data teams, as you see with the dark green bar kind of early in this graph, and quickly spreads to business teams over time. And so that's where the majority then of the growth comes from later is the data team bringing in the business team into the fold, into these analytical processes. And this adoption pattern is what we see across all of our customers. In the aggregate, it's driven 200,000 daily report views. It drives 20,000 new chart creations every day, and it drives more than 5 million queries that get executed across the Mode platform every day. And so that's what we really see as the power of this kind of collaboration between these two things. But we think this is just the beginning. And to share kind of more of where that vision is going and what we think is the next phase of modern BI, I want to turn things over to Florian, our VP of Product and Design.
All right. Thank you, Ben. I'm very excited to join Mode and help organizations effectively use data for all decision making, as Ben just highlighted. Since I joined Mode about a month ago, I've been really impressed with, of course, the team at Mode, but also the product. I've spent probably 20 plus years in data analytics in a variety of roles, and I've used a lot of different products, but I can honestly say I've never really seen the type of kind of viral adoption and growth that Mode enables in organizations. And the way that Mode empowers a data team to very quickly get productive in a matter of minutes and share results of their work with the entire organization, but not just share it in a way that really builds data literacy and collaboration. That's really exciting. And just the other day, I was reading an NPS survey response that kind of highlighted that. The customer said that with Mode, in their words, they went from siloed data to being fully data enabled in under a month. And I think that that's the promise of collaborative modern BI, and that gets me excited to come to work every day. My main focus in my first month at Mode, other than obviously meeting the team and understanding the product, has been to understand the customers and the feedback that they have on the product. And it's really clear that there are some real patterns in the types of product requests that come into us. And these requests tend to really focus on the use of Mode at scale, right? What is clear is that as organizations experience the early successes with Mode and see that viral adoption, it leads to high demands on the data teams. And heads of data are looking to us and other partners in the modern data stack to help them manage these demands better and allow them to scale in a controlled way. A big part of that is, of course, supporting self-service discovery and analysis on curated data, but there are many other enhancement requests that we are seeing and hearing to ensure that Mode can support the wide variety of reporting and analysis needs that come with supporting analysis and the reporting across the entire organization with diverse teams with different needs. And finally, we also see a strong continuing demand to improve what I feel is already a market-leading data analyst efficiency in Mode to answer new questions very, very fast and in flexible ways, collaborate more and more with other stakeholders. So that brings me then to kind of how we respond to these customer needs, right? These are the areas where Mode intends to focus over the next year. First, we want to be able to support the ability for the data team to increase its impact and ensure it can reduce the barriers for everyone to get the relevant and correct information and analysis tools they need to make better decisions. And we believe that doubling down on our code-free end-to-end self-service capabilities is the right way to do that. And the real focus of today's demo will be on this kind of end-to-end self-service capability. So Sam and Nea will show a lot of that shortly. Aside from that, we want to continue to expand Mode's visualization and data storytelling capabilities, as that can really further help data teams to drive adoption of the work. So expect to see investments in new chart types, powerful dynamic filtering, and more things like that. Third, the team has already been focused heavily and delivered a lot of extensive performance and usability improvements in the last few months, and you can expect us to really continue down that path to make sure we can further empower the data team and maximize the leverage of those teams to support the needs of the organization. We also believe we can optimize some of the sharing and collaboration workflows that involve more advanced analysis in notebooks. And finally, as the use of Mode grows, it becomes more critical to be able to effectively govern and manage all this content and to make it more discoverable, right? The easier it is for users to find the assets they're looking for, the work that's already been done, and interact with it, the more likely they are to come back and use these data assets for their day-to-day decision-making. So again, I'm really excited to start work on all these new capabilities to help our customers be successful. Next, Neha and Sam will talk about some of the recent innovations that are core to our support for end-to-end self-service and delivering on the vision of modern BI. Neha?
Thanks, Florian. As Florian mentioned, we really want to empower data teams to give everyone access to the data that they need. And this new way to start a report is where all of that begins. So to date, there's been one way to start a report in Mode, and that's with a SQL query. Now you can start your analysis with a SQL query, with a dataset, which is a reusable container of curated data, or with a DBT metric, which allows you to leverage business logic that's defined in DBT. So if I want to quickly answer a question, like what is my quarterly revenue, without writing any code, I can start with a metric. These metrics are defined in DBT on top of existing models or other metrics, and can be calculated against different time granularities and sliced by additional dimensions, like location, for example. Once I connect to the DBT semantic layer from Mode, I can pull those metrics in and start to explore them in a code-free way to do visual analysis. So since I wanted to understand revenue, let's select the revenue metric and visualize it as a line chart. The metric query is then run against Snowflake data warehouse via DBT's proxy server, and with the resulting data, Mode then generates a chart automatically. I can then update the time granularity to quarter because I wanted to look at quarterly revenue. And then if I wanted to understand my revenue by location, I could then drag location into the colors drop zone and rerun the metric. Once I run the metric, the data is reaggregated by quarter and location, and I can visually analyze my revenue, as well as see the underlying data below. Rerunning the metric when I make changes to the time granularity or add new dimensions ensures that I get consistent data back every time, no matter how I reaggregate the data. But since this feature also leverages Mode's in-memory data engine, Helix, I can also make changes like sorting or updating the colors or the chart type, and those changes take effect immediately. That makes it really easy to iterate and do quick exploration. Metrics are powerful not only for visual code-free exploration, but also for ensuring that metrics are queried consistently by data teams. So I can copy the underlying SQL here and go into the SQL editor. And referencing these metrics via the query editor gets me the same results every time as well. I can also leverage metrics data in the notebooks for more advanced analysis. So for example, if I wanted to forecast revenue for future quarters based on the historical data, I could go into the notebooks here, and you can see that my metrics data is pulled in. I can use Python or R, access popular libraries, or pip install my own. We're continuously improving our notebooks with regular updates to the supported libraries, expanding support to additional popular libraries, as well as improvements to data ingestion to make the experience faster and easier to manage the memory. So you can see my forecast here, but now I actually want to share this work with my team members. I've built some charts using my metric. I've done some more advanced analysis using the notebooks. Now I'm going to add all of this to a report and share it with my team. And Mode's report builder gives me a lot of customization capabilities, so I can update the look and feel, add more context about what I want to share. Users can also see which charts are built using metrics, and so that gives them the confidence that the data is accurate. I also have this report set to run on a schedule, and that means that users can see that the data is up to date and fresh. So whether you want to quickly answer a question with visual exploration or dig deeper in the notebooks or SQL editor, metrics enable you to get a consistent answer every time. Now, let's say I've done all of this analysis, but I want to understand why my revenue numbers have changed over the course of the last few quarters. Maybe I want to look at my data by customer or do more complex visual analysis. This is where a broader, more dimensional set of data that I can still access and analyze in a code-free way might be helpful. So I'll hand it off to Sam now to talk through how datasets can unlock that next level of analysis.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Neha. So as we just saw, metrics are really great for those common repeated questions and those what questions. What was my revenue last week? What is our current NPS score? But they often lead to much deeper questions, questions that might be harder to predict and might require some more investigative analysis. Why am I seeing this dip in revenue? And so that's where data sets come in. Data sets are broad, curated tables of data built by analytics teams in partnership with their business colleagues for much broader exploration on really wide subject areas. And so that revenue metric that we looked at earlier, it might actually sit on a much larger model, maybe an orders table. And there might be situations where you'd instead love to pull in that entire table to make its results available for anyone to do drag and drop analysis on top of. And so here we've got just that, an orders revenue data set and a slightly different product line that anyone in the business could start doing visual analysis on top of by bringing it into a report. But before I do that, I want to take a quick step back and talk about how these data sets get into this browser in the first place. So data sets are a new foundational object type in Mode that live alongside reports and can be organized across collection views. And so here I've got an all company collection. It's got a mix of dashboards and data sets that I could share with my stakeholders. So let's go ahead and create a new data set from scratch. If you are comfortable writing SQL, this editor should feel right at home. And once you're in the datasets editor, you've got a couple of options. You could start to write a new SQL query from scratch. But if you already have some SQL syntax or even a definition that you'd like to make more extensible, you might copy and paste that syntax into here as well. And depending on whether you're doing a lot of your modeling upstream in a tool like dbt, these dataset queries could look as simple as a select star, but they can also contain as much custom logic as you need. So once you're feeling good about the dataset SQL, you can run the query and start to preview the dataset that's generated. And so here I can see the list of columns that were returned from that query. I can also see how they get translated as fields. This is what my business colleagues are going to be able to consume when they're dragging and dropping in those visual environments. And then for every given run, I can see the source syntax that was generated. And so if I'm making changes to a data set, I can always quickly compare the syntax that I ran last run with my latest changes. In addition to creating fields using the SQL query directly, I can also add to my data post-query by using calculated fields. And this is great for adding logic on the fly without having to hit your warehouse again and rerun that query. So a really good example of this is helping users understand how often these orders are being canceled. I get a lot of questions about that. So I could add this cancellation rate field to my data set, and that's going to be made available to anyone using the data along with those fields that were generated directly from the SQL query. Once I'm feeling good about the data itself, I'll want to do a couple things to make it available for my business colleagues. The first thing to do is just give it a name and a description. This will help folks understand what's inside of this data set, how it ought to be used. The next thing I'll want to do is make sure to move it to a workspace collection so that it's broadly discoverable and shows up in that datasets browser. In this case, I've just added it to the all company collection to make sure it's got as much reach as possible. And then the last thing that you'll want to do is think about giving it a schedule. And this is a pretty big shift and kind of an exciting departure from how we've historically thought about data freshness and data maintenance in Mode. What we would hear customers tell us a lot of times is that they'd find themselves with a very similar version of a query, or in some cases, the same version of a query spread out across 10 or 20 dashboards. And if you had to make a change to that SQL query, you had to do it across all of those dashboards. And if your consumers wanted to pull in fresh results, that meant hitting run on every single one of those reports, hitting your warehouse every time, and having to wait for that data to run on demand. And so what Datasets allows you to do is think about abstracting some of those SQL queries out of ad hoc reports and into a dataset and refreshing it in one place. So here I've got a daily schedule at 10 a.m. Once these results return and are materialized into Helix, they'll be made available to any report downstream using the data, and that report can just go ahead and load it in without having to rerun the data and without having to wait for the query to run on demand. All right, so once I've got a dataset schedule, the last thing I'll want to do is just view this dataset. This is what your consumers will see if you share a dataset with them directly. And this might be something that you create as a finished asset in addition to a report or a dashboard. If a request comes in, people have some questions, you might consider partnering with them to build out a really broad dataset so that they can do some of their own investigation. You can also access some handy metadata here and see which reports within the organization are using this data set. It's really helpful as a data set creator to know what might be impacted when you need to make changes, but it's also really helpful as a consumer to see what reports have already been built on top of this data. Maybe someone has already answered the question that I'm looking to answer. In this case, though, I do want to go ahead and create some content from scratch. And so in addition to starting from that blank report and browsing from the list of data sets, I can also start new analysis directly from a specific data set. And that's going to take me to a new report where I've got the data and can start building on top of it. And so the first thing that I might do is just kind of explore the data set itself, see if it has the fields I need. I can also extend my view of the data set by adding functions on the fly. And so a really great example of this is I've added just a very simple case statement. These columns in uppercase are a little hard for me to read. I'm a big fan of emojis. They make it really easy to scan. And so I've just added a simple case statement to curate this data a bit for me. But I'm not limited to case statements. Mode has a ton of out-of-the-box functions that I can use to build on top of the data I've been given, from if statements to contains to running sums. So a lot of power to really be able to build on top of the data, all within my view of the data set. And so once I'm feeling pretty good about the shape of the data, I can start analyzing it in a couple of different ways. So the first is to think about using Mode's quick charts. And these are really great for constrained, templatized, specific layout configurations. And if I know exactly what I want to look at, maybe I just want to understand how my individual account managers are doing, I could go ahead and in a couple of clicks, create a chart that starts to give me some information. So I can see here that Dwight Schrute appears to really be going above and beyond, making a lot of orders. We love to see it. But this isn't giving me the full picture yet. This is showing me the sum of all total orders. But I know that a lot of these are ultimately canceled or returned. And so I want to start to really dig into this data to understand really what's going on. And so from quick charts, I can switch over to Mode's Visual Explorer. And this is a relatively new feature. We've had it out for about a year now. We are constantly adding new improvements to it. But what it is really an open-ended visualization environment that's going to allow me to do a lot more and kind of iterate as I go. And so maybe I still want to look at account managers, but I'm going to start to bring in some categorical data, maybe shipping region and day of the week. And so now I've got the skeleton of a pivot table set up. I can add that order price to my text layer. That's going to tell me how each individual manager is doing on a given weekday. And then the last thing I'll do is slice by that status indicator field that I created earlier and quickly apply some conditional formatting. And so now I've got a much more robust visualization that's giving me a lot more information. Before it seemed like maybe these managers were selling quite a bit. Now I can see really concretely which of these orders are actually being returned or canceled, so I know where to follow up. But because I'm using the Visual Explorer, I'm not constrained to pivot tables. I can create a variety of different visualization types as I go and as I iterate. It's going to really evolve with me. And so let's make a copy of this and just change a couple things to kind of demonstrate that. I'll take out some of these fields, and I'm going to move order price up to rows. And then the last thing I'll do is change this week field. Instead of looking at a categorical weekday, let's look at a continuous time series. And now I've got a faceted line chart starting to give me more information about how these sales are doing over time. But I want to know more than just how much these sales are being sold for. I also want to know the amounts. What is the sort of number of paper reams that my customers are buying? And I'd love to be able to look at these side by side, which I can do really easily by assigning this to a dual axes. And so now I can actually see for each given manager, not only how much are they selling, but also the order amount. And these lines are a little bit hard for me to digest. So the last thing that I'm going to do is set a top end filter to just look at the top 3 performers. This is also a relatively new feature. And then I have a much better visualization showing me just the top 3, but it's giving me a lot of different information than I got from that first pivot table. So really helping me to kind of paint a full picture. And then once I'm feeling really good about these charts, I can start to put them together into my report builder so that I could start to share this analysis out with other people in my company. Because this is all built on top of a data set, I know that anytime I come back to my report, if there's fresher data available, I'll be made aware. I can see there's fresh data from 31 minutes ago, and I can just go ahead and pull that in when it's convenient to me. So I don't have to worry about rerunning the data or waiting for that query to run. I can just load in those latest results. Similarly, if I share this report with anyone, same experience. Running this report is just going to look for fresher dataset data and load it in. And if I'm someone who really prefers knowing that I always have the latest data available, you can also set up a refresh schedule. If maybe the data set you're using runs at 10 a.m., you could set up a cadence to pull those results in at 10:30. So a lot of options depending on the amount of control you want to have. And that was a very quick overview of both data sets and the dbt metrics integration with dbt's new semantic layer, and a recap of Mode's quick charts and the Visual Explorer. Now, a lot of these self-serve features are still in their early days. Our Datasets beta, our open beta just went live today. And so we really want to grow with you and to iterate on these features as we learn more. And so I'm really excited to see where these things go. And with that, I'll hand it over to Taylor for a pretty exciting interview.
Thank you, Sam. What a great demo. Hi, everyone. I'm Taylor Holland, Mode's new head of data. By way of introduction, I previously led data science for Facebook's AI platform. And prior to that, had the privilege of leading data for GitHub. I'm really excited to be at Mode and to be part of the company bringing modern BI to life. Joining us on stage today is Adam Smith, who leads analytics at Imperfect Foods. Adam was not only a member of our Datasets Alpha, but was also one of the first customers to test dbt metrics back when it was still a design prototype. Imperfect has been an incredibly collaborative and engaged partner to us over the years, providing us feedback through our early access programs, from explorations to the Visual Explorer. We'll hear more about how Adam and team have been using these new features we just saw. But before we get into that, we'll start with the broader context of Adam's team at Imperfect Foods. Adam, thanks for joining us. Heads up, Adam, you're on mute. We're missing all what you're saying.
You think at this point we'd all have the unmute button figured out 2 years after we all started working from home. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Adam, let's start off by talking a little bit about Imperfect Foods. I'd love to hear about what Imperfect Foods does, how the data team is structured, and how you all operate.
Sure, absolutely. So Imperfect Foods' mission is to eliminate food waste and build a better food system for everyone. So we do that by buying produce or other groceries that would go to waste, and we sell them directly to consumers. They come on our website, tell us exactly what they want, and we deliver that box to their door. So our data team is centralized. We have a centralized data team that supports the whole organization, all the different parts of that operation, which you can imagine there's a lot of different things, from the people who have to buy that food, the people who are packing those boxes and getting in our vans to get there. The marketing team is bringing in new customers, all these different groups supported by our data team. And the way we've set it up is that we now have a data analyst who's tightly linked with one of those departments. So the operations team has a data analyst, the marketing team has a data analyst, merchandising team has a data analyst, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a relatively new feature for us. We used to have a more, kind of round robin way of dealing with requests. A ticket would come in, whoever happened to be available would work on it. So an individual analyst might work, marketing 1 week, operations the next week, merchandising, then maybe back to marketing. Never really fully understanding what those folks on that team were working on, never fully understanding the context, and always kind of just throwing a dashboard over the wall back to the other teams. Okay, you put in a fairly specific request and we gave you a fairly specific answer. Now we're moving on. We've decided to move away from that and have this much more collaborative environment where we're working closely with those folks to really understand the context. So the data analyst is not just throwing reports over the wall, but making sure that we're creating reports that are really helping them answer questions and drive the business forward.
Talk to me a little bit about that shift. What was the impetus to move from a more service desk approach, if you will, into that centralized structure with named folks who are part of those teams?
Yeah, there are kind of two parts to it. Our marketing team really kind of pushed us to say, hey, we really want a person who just does marketing. We do a lot of interesting, kind of unique stuff in the marketing team. We really want someone who'll just work with us. So we said, okay, let's hire a marketing person. We saw how well that worked. And we thought, hey, this might be something we want to roll out more. The other side of it is just the feedback we were getting from the folks we were working in, who felt like they had to put in a pretty specific request into the ticketing system. And even then they felt like a lot of times what they got back was not what they were really asking for. And so there was a really demand to say, hey, listen, you're the data experts. We're the business experts. Let's work much more collaboratively. We want to talk to you. Hey, we've got this idea. Hey, we've got this thing coming up. Hey, we've got this issue we've seen. And we want to understand how data could play a role in making it better and taking us to the next level. And we realized that the way to do that was really to make sure we had a tight link with an analyst working closely with that team.
That makes sense. We have a almost identical structure here at Mode. We found it works quite well in really engaging analysts and data scientists as a true member of that team. At prior companies, I've seen a similar evolution, and it's amazing how much, frankly, engagement you get out of these smart folks we hire to data orgs when they're actually part of the decision-making process, part of the team stand-up, part of the team sprint, and really a full member. Speaking of collaboration, I'm curious, what does the ideal collaborative relationship look like when you think about business teams or stakeholders? How do you know that that's going well?
And there's a couple things that we look for there. We really want both sides to be giving and taking. If it's really a successful relationship, we don't want, at first, some of the teams sort of treated this new setup that we had as just like, oh, great, it's still basically the ticketing system, but now I know exactly who's going to be working on it. And that was kind of a good step one, but really where we want to go is what you're talking about, having someone who's attending those stand-up meetings, who really understands what that team is working on, in a place where kind of both sides of that equation are being proactive. So the business unit is reaching out to that data person, as soon as they start thinking about a new initiative, as soon as they're thinking about a new project, let's bring in the data person right from the beginning. One of the problems with the old system is we would find out at the very end of a project, oh, by the way, we're going to need this data in the data warehouse, which obviously is a lot more frustrating from the data point of view than finding out at the beginning and kind of working that into your plan. So that's kind of what it looks like from the business side. But from the data side, it's really important that data analyst is more proactive as well and thinking about the problems. And a lot of times business users, they may kind of know they have a problem or something, but they may not know all the data techniques that exist out there in terms of, modeling or, analysis that might help solve a problem. And so, again, the data analyst is not just sitting back and waiting for tickets to say, oh, you've got a problem like this. I think this particular analytic technique might help with that. So trying to be proactive on both sides.
That makes sense. That way you can fold in not just the data literacy, but statistical intuition, maybe different angles on types of rigor around thinking, so that as folks are bringing up those problems, or even before they discover them, that analyst or that data scientist can really, really be involved.
Absolutely.
Not to put you on the spot, but I'm curious, what are the best collaborative relationships you have with business teams right now at Imperfect Foods? Who are your champions?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's two examples that I'll give. The marketing team, which I've kind of already mentioned, they're definitely like one of the most gung-ho about data. And they probably have some of the most data literate people on their team. Some of them know how to write SQL. They're often creating, wild Google spreadsheets with pivots and different things in there, trying to solve problems. So they've kind of already thought through a lot of things. And so that's a really great relationship in that they've got a huge demand for data. They want more, there's no shortage of work for that analyst who's assigned to the marketing team. The other example I would give is a little bit different, but still very exciting. I'd say one of the few downsides of this new structure that we have is if you don't have enough analysts to kind of have a one-to-one relationship with departments, sometimes you have a department that's kind of stuck out in the cold a little bit.
Sure.
And unfortunately for us right now, that's our customer care team. They still get support, but they don't have that kind of dedicated analyst. Mm-hmm. But they've shown a real hunger for more analytics this year. And they actually reached out to me and said, hey, we know you're resource constrained right now. You can't have a full analyst force, but we would love to learn SQL. We would love to learn Mode better so that we can go in and do a lot of this ourselves. So they actually reached out to us, and we've been working with them to teach them SQL. They've been using the tools that Mode has to learn SQL and Visual Explorer and things like that, and so that they are increasing their data skills and answering a lot of questions on their own. So I think the kind of bottom line of that best team is really that hunger for wanting to use data and analytics to solve better problems. And whether you come to us like that customer care team, where those folks did not know SQL, did not know much about data analysis, or the marketing folks, really kind of top of the line, pretty good, almost data analyst light, wherever you are on that spectrum, we can help you.
That makes sense. That's great. Speaking of self-serve and teams that are motivated to learn SQL or not, talk to me a little bit about the role of your analysts or a data team in implementing self-serve. How do you think that operates today, and how do you think it should look like? What do you think that should look like?
Yeah, that's a good question too. Definitely, the data team, I think, kind of owns those tools, owns the data, and then getting that in the hands of folks is definitely, something the data team should be responsible for. And so how I sort of see that is making sure folks know what's available. So whatever level you're at in self-serve organization, even if it's, having to write SQL queries, which obviously is not, I think, the final state where anyone wants to be, but that's where some organizations find themselves. Letting folks know about, what's available, what they can get, from SQL is a big responsibility. And that's kind of step one in self-serve. And then it's working with those teams, understanding where they're at and building out tools that they need to get them there. So let's just say, for example, everyone on the marketing team knows SQL and they feel like they're good. We don't need anything else from your team, Adam. We've got this under control. Okay, great. Then maybe that's what self-serve looks like for the marketing team. To go back to that customer care team example, they have a hunger to learn, but it might be great to be able to set up some tools that make it easier for them, to some reports where they can use explore mode to go deeper, or have access to some data on their own, like the data sets that Sam was just showing us, that they don't need to write the SQL. There's probably 5 or 6 data sets that we could write that would answer most of the questions for that customer care
foundational set, essentially.
Exactly. And so just working with each of those teams, getting them the tools they need, training them up, and then being there to support them as you go through it. And it's never going to be, we call it self-serve. It kind of makes it sound like you turn the lights on and you can just kind of go home and do your own thing. It's never going to be like that. It's always going to be a collaborative experience. But definitely kind of nudging them along, trying to encourage them to do more. When they ask you for something, maybe say, hey, happy to help you out, but did you know you could sort of do this on your own in this way? Not in an unfriendly way, but just like, it's going to take us a week or 2 to get to it. You might be able to do it this afternoon.
Yep, that makes sense. We have a sort of similar continuum at Mode, as you might imagine, where there are folks who are, submitting PRs against our data model structure and completely self-serving and bringing us stuff. They're like, we think this is a great improvement, to, as you described, folks who are comfortable exploring SQL, but we can give them kind of a more guided experience, either through collections or data sets, to narrow down the scope of search to something that's like a little bit more relevant, or using code-free tools like Visual Explorer. I'm curious to hear a little bit, how has self-serve evolved at Imperfect Foods? Did you walk into that setup and everyone had that kind of approach, or was there some cultural expectation or shifting that happened to get you to where you are today?
Yeah, there was definitely cultural shifting on both sides, I would say. By that, I mean the data team and the business users. I've been at Imperfect for a little over 2 years now. And when I first joined, I think that data team very much felt they had to keep the data secure, and it was their job to make sure that no one ever looked at a piece of data that was wrong. Mm-hmm. And that sounds like a perfectly good goal when you state it like that. But the problem when you sort of drill down and see what that means is that you don't want people to see in progress dashboards, even though that's a great opportunity to collaborate and understand what would really work. You don't want people to have access to that raw data, because honestly, they're probably going to misunderstand something at some point if you give, a lot of people access to that underlying data. That is a concern, and it's a legitimate thing to think about. But you also have to think about the opposite risk, which is that folks won't have access to what they need. They won't be able to answer questions, or they'll try and go around the data team and try and, get the data another way, which kind of just defeats the purpose of having this great centralized data all in the cloud data warehouse, like so many organizations are able to have today. So that's where we started. And I would say we're pretty far along in our journey. We still got a lot more work to do in terms of, making it simpler for people to access the data. But we've really worked with our stakeholders, and they're much more excited about being able to answer things themselves, whether that's through SQL or through data sets or through other tools. And the data team is much more open now about, yeah, absolutely. Reports out there, we want to make sure they're accurate. That's still important. That's always going to be important. But it's much more a collaborative process. It's much more trying to understand what folks need, making sure we're building reports that are answering the questions they need, that are going to be used, not just kind of go out there and make pretty charts.
Yep, exactly. So you've mentioned data sets a couple times in the role of self-serve at Imperfect. Can you dive in a little bit more? I'd love to hear if there's a good case study or example we could learn about or take away on how to use data sets to get to that sort of cultural shift.
Yeah, a couple things we can share there. So what we've done is each of our analysts has kind of reached out to their teams to say, hey, what kind of data sets might be, useful? And again, collaborating on not just us saying, hey, we think this data set is useful, let's throw it out there. Let's really think about the type of, questions people want to be able to answer. And that's a great way to ask folks, if you go to someone who doesn't really understand SQL and you say, hey, we've got this new tool, data sets, we can build you a data set. What kind of data do you want? They might be like, I guess orders and sales, would be good. But if you ask them, what kind of questions do you want to be able to answer? I need to know how many orders per fulfillment center per week. Okay, great. Now I can start to think about how I can build that out. So it's another kind of tool in our belt to say when we're working with our teams about what would make the most sense, how can we best serve these folks? And now that whenever we build a new report, we don't immediately, obviously the only way you used to be able to do it was to write the SQL in there. And that's fine. And that still makes a lot of sense in a lot of cases. But sometimes, we want to think, well, does the data set make sense here? Is this data that, maybe is only refreshed infrequently, that we could do this kind of one time per day and maybe power a couple of reports from the same data set? And then that underlying data is available to other folks. Mm-hmm. And I'd say lastly, the best example we have at our organization of really the power of data sets is for our operations team.
Okay.
We've had great KPIs for a long time. If you were just an executive and you want to know how many orders we had last week, what was our churn rate, any of those kind of basic questions, we've been able to do reporting like that. And we've got line charts and bar charts that show the trend. And we could tell you that, 1.5% of our orders last week were delivered late, or whatever the metric, number might be. And that's great if you're maybe the COO and you're kind of tracking that number and you want to say, okay, then it went down to 1.4 and then 1.3, and great, we're making progress. But if you're actually the person in the fulfillment center who's managing the people driving those vans, actually kind of in charge of that, it's not enough to know how many missing items we had or how many boxes were late. You need to know what fulfillment center was it at? What time was it? What line was it at? You need to get super detailed. And it's a lot of data. And it was really hard for us to find a way to give that data to our operations team in a way that was easy for them to understand. That was a big frustration for them. So when we were able to build out a data set that had this data at a very fine-grained level, that they were able to drill down and start to answer these questions and really see, okay, was this fulfillment center, this line? Let me go talk to that supervisor. Oh, this was the problem. Okay, here's the steps we need to take to make sure that doesn't happen again. That was a real game changer for us.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that that's working out for you all. Thank you, Adam. I really appreciate you taking the time to share with us. It's been great to learn about Imperfect Foods, learn about your team, learn about how you all use Mode, and we're excited to keep learning from you all as you keep sharing with us about how the product works for you. To wrap it up, I'm going to hand the mic. Thank you. To wrap us up, I'm going to hand the mic back to Gaurav.
Thank you so much, Adam and Taylor. Really enjoyed your discussion. Felt like I learned a lot. So thank you so much. Folks, we couldn't be more excited about the vision of modern BI with the data team at its core, and look forward to partnering with each of you to make this vision a reality. And so in closing, on behalf of the entire Mode family, I wanted to thank you for your time today and wish you and your loved ones the very best for the upcoming holiday season. Thank you.